Hope everybody's doing great. So welcome to our discussion today. We're going to look at one of the basic characteristics of living organisms that we discussed in one of our videos uh, concerning the characteristics of living organisms. And this is the concept of locomotion or the concept of movement. So in this case, we said that this particular aspect of locomotion or movement, is displayed by both plants and animals, in a sense that for living organisms to survive in their environment, in the presence of perhaps adverse environment, or rather, or in some cases for animals, where we find the presence of some predators, we'll see that some animals display this concept of course, or rather all animals display this characteristic of movement in order to assist them escape from such an environment whereby there's a presence of predators. And secondly, we said that for animals, they display characteristics of movement in order for them to search for food, or perhaps try to find their mates in order to ensure that there's a continuation of their species through the concept of reproduction. Now, for today, we're going to look at some of the characteristics of this particular aspect of movement. And then basically, we're going to restrict ourselves to support and movement in humans, whereby we're going to look at the skeletal system. Now, the human skeletal system displays different characteristics, whereby we're going to see that it's made up of bones, which basically are connected with the musculoskeletal system, in order to facilitate a collaborative effort of bringing about movement and other particular roles that we have already mentioned. Now, this skeleton integrates different functionalities, whereby also, apart from being in conjunction, working in conjunction with the musculoskeletal system, it also works with the cardiovascular system, whereby we're going to see that there are some parts of the body, like the blood cells, which are going to be manufactured basically in this specific part of the skeletal system. And apart from that, there are other functions which we're going to discuss later, perhaps in other topics which are concerned with support and movement. Now, basically, bones and muscles work together to bring about support and movement. And the human skeletal system that we have put today as our topic for discussion is made up of two specific parts. That is the axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton, whereby the axial skeleton basically consists of the skull, the sternum, the rib cage, and what we refer to as the vertebral column. We're going to see that these different parts of the human skeletal system, for the axial and appendicular skeleton, that is made up of the limbs and the girdles, play different roles, perhaps, which we are going to mention as we go by in our discussion. So basically, I'm going to use a second illustration apart from this first one that we have learned about the concept of axial and appendicular skeleton, in order to try and illustrate our point in trying to figure out how this human skeletal system works. Now, our second illustration is a complete set of the human skeletal system, basically the front view. Now, we're going to use these two specific illustrations in order to try and find out how these different parts of the body play a complementary role in facilitating the functions. Now, basically, as I've mentioned, the concept of the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton, we are going to see that the axial skeleton generally plays a role in trying to protect internal organs like the brain, the heart, and the lungs, which we are going to see. And also, apart from that, there is a vertebral column that we're going to see here that encompasses or encloses what we call the spinal cord, which we are going to learn later when we're going to discuss about the vertebral column. The appendicular skeleton that we said consists of the limbs and the girdle are going to play a role in facilitating movement by the articulation of different types of bones that we're going to look into. Now, apart from the bones that I've mentioned, of course, we have the skeleton that is made up of the skull, the vertebral column. Now, the total that is consisting of the axial and appendicular skeleton, make up the skeletal system. Apart from that, we are going to see that there are other parts of this specific skeletal system, like the cartilages and the ligaments, which of course I've not shown here. We're going to discuss it in a different video when we're looking at the specific bones and their particular parts. Now, the cartilages we are basically more flexible than the bones, but they are stiffer than the muscles. I talked about the concept of a musculoskeletal system, whereby the bones play an important role together with the muscles to facilitate movement. Now, these cartilages are basically flexible than the bones, materials which are flexible than the bones but stiffer than the muscles, whereas the ligaments are a band of dense fibrous tissues which connect, of course, to this skeletal system. And basically they link these specific parts of a bone to bone, as I've mentioned, the concept of articulation. Now, basically, we're going to look at some of the functions of these parts, different parts of the skeletal system for the axial and appendicular skeleton that I've talked about, so that we can be able to appreciate their roles in facilitating other functions apart from the support and movement. Now, I've talked about the concept of the axial skeleton that consists of the skull. The skull is basically this upper part of the human body, which I'm trying to encircle at this specific point. Rather, so whenever we're going to discuss, I've just put these two different types of illustrations, because sometimes we're going to find maybe a specific name which has been mentioned somewhere, and we're going to find another one maybe expanded through a different illustration. So this basically is going to assist us and try to figure out some of the details that may be omitted in the first case, whereas they are present in the second one. Now, we're going to look at the function of the skull as a part of the support, the skeletal system, perhaps in trying to see some of these functions so that we can be able to appreciate its role as part of the human skeletal system. Now, this skull is made up of many bones that are joined together to form what we call the cranium. So basically, when we're trying to discuss about the concept of the cranium, we're going to see that different bones are joined together to form what we call there are a range of movable joints and immovable joints which are found within this human skeletal system. But for the skull, it consists of immovable joints that we're going to see later when we're going to discuss about the expanded or the deeper part of the discussion on the cranium. And then it's made up of the lower and upper jaw, and this is the mandible, of course, which is articulated to the upper part of the cranium using some joints that we're going to learn on our discussion on joints. So basically, the role of the cranium is to enclose and protect the delicate part of the body, which is referred to as the brain, that is found inside this skull. Now, there are some perforations or allowances, or perhaps, as I can say, small holes on this particular part of the cranium that allow the blood vessels and nerves into and out of the brain in order to facilitate its functions. Now, we are going to see also that the upper and the lower part of these jaws form part of the digestive system that we're going to see later, and it consists of teeth which is used to break down food into small particles to facilitate the process of digestion. Now, this basically forms what we call a movable joint in that particular cranium, and we're going to see that other joints which are found on this upper part, as I've already mentioned, are referred to as immovable joints. Now, this particular part of the cranium and the upper, we're going to see the anterior part, this the posterior part. There's an articulation between the skull and this lower part of the vertebral column that we're going to see that allow nodding of the head. So we're going to learn about the axis and the atlas when we shall discuss about the concept of different parts bones of the skeletal system that I've mentioned already. So we're going to also to discuss, just in a nutshell, as we have seen the function of the skull, we're going to also try to see this part of the skeletal system that we refer to the rib cage, that is sometimes referred to as the thoracic cavity. So therefore, this part of the human skeletal system protects delicate organs like the heart and the lungs, which are found inside here. And it's made up of ribs, These are known as ribs, which are articulating, of course, with the vertebral column at the back, and this particular part, which is referred to as the sternum, at the front part of that thoracic cavity. So in this case, we're going to see that the sternum, this is a bony structure that supports the ribs, and it offers also some, or rather, large surface area for attachment of muscles, which are, of course, are back muscles and the abdominal muscles that are found within this particular region. Now, the vertebral column that I mentioned as part of the exoskeleton also consists of what we call the vertebrae. These are different bones that are joined together by what we are going to see referred to as intervertebral discs, which articulate together, and they have an allowance in between that we are going to see that allows for the existence of the central nervous system, which is known as the spinal cord. Now, the spinal cord, of course, we're going to see that in conjunction with the brain, it plays a very vital role in ensuring that different parts of the body coordinate well. Now, apart from what we have discussed already, I've mentioned about the concept of cartilages and ligaments. The human skeletal system is made up of different bones. Now, in that case, we're going to see that these bones in totality are made up of different types of bones. We're going to see that the axial skeleton consists basically of around 80 bones. In particular, that's the number of bones that are consisted in the axial skeleton. And the upper and lower appendicular skeleton, which we said consists of the girdle and the limbs. The upper appendicular skeleton consists of 64 bones, whereas the lower one consists of 62 bones, which makes up a total of 206 bones, which are contained in this particular skeletal system. Now, we're going also to see that, as I've mentioned, the skull protects the brains and gives shape to the face, and therefore the thorax cavity surrounds the heart and the lungs, as I've said in summary, and then the vertebral column provide a structure for the body and protect the spinal cord. Now, apart from that, we are going also to see that this particular part that you refer to the skeletal system play an important role in that it makes up 20% of the body weight in humans. And of course, that is relative, as we're going to see in different parts of our other skeletal systems that we're going to learn about. And also, apart from this, we're going to see that there are other significant bones which are found in this skeletal system that forms a framework that supports delicate tissues and perhaps provide reinforcement. In that, there are other smaller bones which are found inside our inner part of the ear that we're going to look at. Now, I mentioned about the concept of reservoirs for, the manufacture of blood cells. And apart from that, these bones are going to form, or the skeletal system is going to form a reservoir for important minerals like the calcium, which are going to be very much essential for the body. And apart from the manufacture of the new blood cells that I've talked about. Now, the calcium part basically forms, the bones basically are formed by this particular mineral that we have mentioned, that is calcium, which makes them to be strong and light in order to facilitate this concept of movement. Now, so we have discussed about the different functionalities of this specific part of a human support system. In our next video, we're going to look at different parts of the bones that I've mentioned, basically, which is going to assist us try to figure out what roles and functions they play in order to facilitate the concept of support and movement. Now, so we can see there are different shapes of these bones, which are these specific or different parts of this skeletal system. And some of them, as we can see, like these ones are flat bones, and others like these ones are long bones, where the others are short bones. And basically, in our discussion, we're going to mention about that concept of long, short, and flat bones, etc., which are going to assist us in a detailed form, try to figure out how this skeletal system works. Now, catch us in our next video as we discuss about different types of bones and different parts of bones, which of course are going to form an integral part of this human skeletal system. So for today, we will have to stop there. catch us in our next video. Bye. God bless you.